hungry people. Now, I'm only supposed to have 1 or 2 minutes, but as the ranking member of the Ag Committee, I'm going to take a little privilege and say that little show by the Ag Secretary, Brooke Rollins, on Friday in this hallowed ground of the Capitol was disgusting. To call people who are on SNAP, who need a little food assistance, corrupt, to call out a program that's one of the lowest fraud rates in this federal government, 1.6%, that is disingenuous. That is corrupt. People are hungry right now, today. They don't know where their next meal is coming. We are here as Democrats. We are showing up. And where are they? My Republican colleagues complicit. Rooting him on from the sidelines while they're on vacation. Our Republican colleagues, it's long past time to stand up to this lawless, heartless administration. With that, I yield to the amazing ranking member of the Rules Committee, member of the Agriculture Committee, a true champion for hunger in our country, Jim Lawless.
Republicans' decision to withhold nutrition assistance is disgusting. It's immoral, it's wrong. I can't think of an adjective that describes how cruel and terrible this administration is. Donald Trump talks about America first. But what about the 16 million American children who rely on SNAP? Or the 8 million American seniors who are worried, sick about where their next where the next meal comes from? Or the 1 million American veterans who have to choose healthcare and staying fed? Over 40 million people in this country rely on SNAP. These guys already cut $186 billion in food assistance in their big ugly bills to give every tax break and handout they can think of to greedy billionaires. And now they have the gall to tell everyday Americans that you have to pick between food and health care. I mean, who the hell comes up with that kind of sick, twisted choice? I reject it. I reject the idea that we have to choose. And I reject their belief that we can't afford to help the American kids, seniors, and workers who are in need. Now he wants to pay out partial nutrition benefits. Here's an idea. Why don't we give partial tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires and give hungry people the food assistance that they need to eat? He found $40 billion to bail out a right-wing cuckoo clock in Argentina, but he can't find the money to help 40 million Americans who rely on SNAP make ends meet. How heartless are these people? Look, the truth is these guys don't give a shit about everyday people. They've never gone hungry. They don't even buy their own groceries, and they'll never have to choose between putting food on the table or paying for health care. They have private cooks and concierge doctors. This is all a game to them. And by the way, we still don't even know what the hell this administration is doing with benefits. I mean, this morning, as my colleague just stated, Trump posted on Truth Social that he would illegally withhold benefits. Now they're saying they won't. What I do know is that it's not that complicated. Now his press secretary is trying to walk it back. But here's the deal. Whatever they do, whether they pay partial benefits or no benefits, whether they choose half cruelty or full cruelty, here's what we know for sure. Republicans are choosing to go after nutrition assistance. Trump is doing this because he is a bad person. He's a lousy president and an even worse human being. He's weaponizing hunger and trying to rip food away from more than 40 million Americans, including 16 million children, for sadistic political leverage. How dare he? How dare he exploit the pain of hungry Americans? How dare he make working folks choose between health care and food? How dare he starve poor children who go to bed hungry? These people are sick in the head. They take food away from poor folks on Friday, and then they go to church on Sunday and proclaim to be good Christians. I'm not sure where in the Bible it says that starving children makes you a good person. I must have missed that part. But my faith tells me something else. It tells me that there's a special place in hell for people who rip food away from hungry families. And if my Republican colleagues continue to use poor kids' political leverage, if they continue to make it even harder for working folks to get by, if they force Americans to choose between health care and food, then cruelty will be their legacy, and they will have no one but themselves to blame for the pain they've inflicted on the American people. Because in the richest country in the history of the world, no one should worry about where their next meal comes from. And with that, I'm now happy to yield to the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, my good friend Greg Meeks. Woo.
Thank you for that inspiring, truthful words. That's what we need here is the truth. And I think that's what we've been able to see here today. Where the President of the United States and where the Republicans really are. And what they are really doing and not doing here in Washington, D.C. As families across the country struggle to make ends meet. They're not making life affordable. That's what the president talked about when he disagreed. We're going to make things affordable. They're not making sure that people receive the kind of care, health care. One of the reasons why the government is shut down right now. What they're doing is taking away food, taking food out of the disabled mouth, taking food out of seniors' mouths, taking food out of children's mouths. That is what they're doing. And that's what we've got to deal with. And that's why we've been here week after week waiting for them to come back to the table. When have you ever seen, in the middle of a shutdown, a president of the United States, instead of sitting in the White House, bringing people together to try to figure out how do we work together to have a bipartisan solution? It has never happened before. This president has spent more time on the golf course than spending time with leaders here to resolve this issue. This president has spent more time around the world. Most times when people around the world, even presidents, have serious business around the world, but when it's a domestic problem, it's I got to get up and come home and try to help resolve the issues that are before me. Not this guy. Not this Congress. In fact, he showed you. We said that he lies. That's what he does. And that's not something that I'm just saying. Let's go back to 2016. That's what Marco Rubio said. He was a liar. That's what all of the lead Republicans said right now. That he was a liar. And he's lying again. Even when you're talking about negotiating something. He doesn't intend to. We've seen it in his big, ugly bill. There's been shutdowns before. Never in the history of this country where there was a shutdown was there ever any threat to stop SNAP. Only with this immoral president who thinks he is king. In fact, what Trump said goes directly against what his own USDA was saying just hours ago. And it's what his own press secretary said afterwards. With this administration, there's never order. It's just chaos and confusion. So by choosing not to fully fund and listen to him, not to fund, because we know now he doesn't want to fund SNAP. What the Republicans are doing, they're cutting the assistance, as indicated, of 42 million Americans. You know, I look at my district alone. 80,000 households rely on that nutrition and assistance. And at a time when the cost of a dozen eggs is at an all-time high, and people are already struggling to feed their families because of his tariffs, driving up the cost of everything, inflation increasing, and now he comes here, he reveals who he is. So I think that the American people are getting a glimpse of what we see and have to deal with every day. And I think that anytime you have someone that's leading, you got to look at the culture spirit is behind it. And that is the members of the Republican Party who refuse to come back here and on the floor and to work together to get this done. They are as guilty as he is. And they're going to pay for it at the polls. But we are going to stand. We're going to stand with the poor. We're going to stand with neglected. We're going to stand with the disabled. We're going to stand for all of the American people and not play politics and cause them to have hunger and cause people to die. This is not a game. This is serious. Lives are on the line. We will stand. Where are my Republican colleagues who are supposed to put the Constitution first and the people first? They're not to be seen.
Good afternoon. This morning, President Trump said that he will only distribute SNAP benefits when the government reopens. He said this despite federal judge ruling that he must use emergency SNAP money to make sure that families do not go hungry. If there is one message that I want you to take away from today, it's that this president is willing to break the law to starve people. I'll say that again. The president is willing to break the law in order to starve people. Over the weekend, I had the chance to visit with people in my district, Danielle and Raven, who are trying to get ahead. They're working moms, trying to put food on the table. I visited Marion Polk Food Chair in my district, and when I spoke to their staffs, it's clear families are hurting. More than ever, people need help putting food on the table, and at the same time, there's less food to go around. And so when children, seniors, veterans are hungry, what is the president's response? Does he send a $40 billion check to those families like he did to Argentina? No, he says, let them starve. To the 42 million Americans, including over 100,000 people in just my district alone who rely on SNAP, who rely on $6 a day worth of food, here's what I want you to know. The president and the Republican Party have decided that it's necessary for 42 million people to go hungry as a political tactic. They believe that you are not deserving of help, and they're willing to break the law to make sure you don't get it. But my Democratic colleagues and I are here to tell you, they are wrong. You did not do anything wrong. You do not deserve this cruelty. Hunger is a policy choice. You deserve support. You deserve to be helped. And everyone up here is willing to fight like hell to make sure you get it. Thank you. Next up, I am pleased to welcome my colleague from Delaware, Congressman Wright.
Thank you so much, Representative Salinas. I stand here today on behalf of more than 100,000 Delawareans who rely on SNAP to put food on their table and who have seen their lives thrown into chaos and uncertainty because of the cruelty of Donald Trump. No matter our politics, we should agree on this. No child in America should go hungry. But right now, Donald Trump is choosing to withhold life-saving food assistance that millions of families rely on just to get by. In Delaware, I think of a 25-year-old mom, Laurel, who's about to bring her first child into this world. Her doctor told her that she couldn't keep working at the chicken plant so late in her pregnancy. So now she's without an income. She is doing everything right, but she's left wondering how she'll afford the next meal for herself. That's what these programs mean. They're not handouts, they're lifelines. They help working families bridge the gap between a paycheck and a pantry shelf. If the Republican Party is truly pro-family, they would join us in demanding that this administration fully fund SNAP. If they were truly pro-life, they would work with us to solve this healthcare crisis. But instead, they are nowhere to be seen. Donald Trump has the full legal authority, and let's be clear, the legal obligation to fund SNAP right now. He could feed 42 million Americans today, including millions of children, seniors, and veterans. If he wanted to feed the hungry, he would. Instead, he is choosing cruelty over compassion. And families in Delaware and across the country are paying the price. Every parent, every neighbor, every community deserves better. And all of us will continue to keep fighting until no one in this country has to wonder where their next meal will come from. And with that, I'd like to yield to a co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, my friend, Representative Robin Kelly.
Thank you to my colleague. Thank you everyone for being here. There are nearly 190,000 people in the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois that depend on SNAP. So nearly 1/4 of my district, urban, suburban, and rural, that are going hungry. We need these funds released, not next week, not next month, but now. As you've heard, he found $40 billion to bail out Argentina, $300 million for his ballroom, and I don't believe that's coming out of his pocket. It is okay with him that children starve, veterans starve, seniors starve, and people with disabilities, that the money is not there for them. We talked about the judges that said, feed the people, let the money go. He's a convicted felon. He doesn't care what the judges say. And I want to tell people, we are all in this together. Whether you're on SNAP or not, if people can't buy groceries, that affects the large stores and the small stores. They won't need as many people working there. They won't need as much food. So the farmers lose out also. We are all in this together. It's not about the other guy. It's about all of us. With that, I'd like to introduce my great colleague from the great state of Pennsylvania, Christy.
Thank you so much for the chance to talk to you. I'm struck by two images. One is the opulence and disgustingness of the party that was held at the Mar-a-Lago last week or this weekend. The Great Gatsby, let them eat cake kind of moment. And the other is a visual that I can't get out of my head of the Grinch. And the Grinch, as you all remember when you were children, slithering down the Christmas tree to take everything away from that family, including Cindy Lou Who's candy cane. It's really hard not to understand or see that this is exactly the same image that's happening, but it's not her candy cane, it's her dinner that's being taken away right now. Next week, we will be celebrating Veterans Day, and I'm here to talk about veterans. We celebrate the long time honored tradition of the contributions of people in uniform that they make to our nation. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has apparently decided that this Veterans Day, we're going to let 1.2 million veterans across this country, about 60,000 across my home state of Pennsylvania, go hungry rather than honor them for their service. And just today, I received some testimonials from veterans in my office, and I will quote them. I'm unemployed, and my family of four just lost SNAP. My wife is on disability, and I've started dipping into my 401k just to cover my bills. Another one today. My family's been to multiple food banks just to eat, while Congress still gets a paycheck. And I'd like to point out that we're all here, and I don't see a Republican all day. This administration, and dare I say, Secretary Pete Hegseth, talk a lot about supporting our military and the warrior mentality they're in, but they are sending 13% of military households to not be able to eat because 13% of military households rely on these programs as well. So right now, today, there's a $5 billion contingency fund sitting at the Department of Agriculture that could be used to pay these benefits and pay them now. Something that this administration apparently has no interest in doing. They did, however, have the time to spend in fighting this in court, which they, by the way, lost. And even just in the last few days, they've said again, they will comply, they won't comply. Now they say they will again, or will they again? This reminds me very much of Grinch, on again, off again, in again, on again, around again. Those kinds of words just roll through my head. Regardless of what Trump is saying now, the end result is the same right now. Vulnerable people in America and our veterans and our service members are struggling. These are real people. Labor isn't about politics, it's about principle. We demand that we are met here by our Republican colleagues, that they unfreeze the money and that we unlock this government now. With that, I have the opportunity of introducing co-chair Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. Yes, excellent.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to meet with three remarkable women who all sustain their families, and in one case, herself, on food assistance coming from the SNAP program. Sordanza, Annette, and Sheba shared their stories with our whole community at a news conference. Sheba is this month having to choose to cut back on her payment so that she can at least put groceries in her pantry for her family and her teenage son. I've raised a teenage son, who's now a young adult. I know how much food they eat And Annette is a senior living only on Social Security. She could not get her remarks without bursting into tears because she only got $100 a month, and not having that amount of money, that small amount of money, she doesn't know what she's going to do because it helped a little bit so that she could make sure she could go to the grocery store. And Flordanza, because of the big ugly law, had her food stamps, had her SNAP benefits cut from $200 a month to $23 a month. And now, even if Trump decides to pay that benefit from the contingency fund, which the court ordered him to do, she's going to get $14 for families with children. And there's no other way to put this. We're here to stop this push to turn the Republican shutdown into Trump's Hunger Games. That is what this is about. And there's no other way to put it. Donald Trump's brazen defiance of our courts is lawless, cruel, and immoral. And I know we shouldn't be surprised by anything that Jeffrey Epstein's best friend in the White House does anymore. This guy is billed involvement as he snatches food from the mouths of children. He and his Republican enablers brought up healthcare coverage costs as they got Medicaid and raid Medicare. Then they shut down our government after stuffing massive tax rates into the pockets of billionaires. Now Trump viciously withholds food from moms, seniors, and veterans despite court requirements that he help them. The stress and suffering that Republicans are inflicting on billions of Americans is unmatched in our lifetimes. Healthcare premiums are doubling, prices are higher across the board. Federal employees who are furloughed or without pay for a month and now must endure threats that Trump will even snatch this back pay from them. And all of our families just witnessed the Trump trick-or-treat tax when they bought high-priced Halloween candy. Thank you, Trump, for those outrageous tariffs, the tariff taxes. Now Trump wants to steal sacred family Thanksgiving meals from 42 million Americans. Instead of making life easier and more affordable, Republicans inflict nonstop stress and higher costs on all of us. Well, Democrats will not stand quietly and idly by for this mayhem. We're demanding action now to reopen the government and lower high costs of living, especially for health care. We know the American people deserve better, and that's why we're here to do actual work and to quickly reach a bipartisan deal that reopens the government. No more my way or the highway. Get your asses here to the Capitol, sit down at the table, and help us work this out. This is unprecedented that they are AWOL. We're ready to negotiate a plan that makes healthcare more affordable, drives down the cost of living. What we will not do is idly watch Trump and Republicans weaponize hunger and make 42 million struggling Americans play pawns in his ugly Hunger Games. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague on appropriations, Betty McCollum.
There are a couple of appropriators here, and I'm going to get in the weeds for a second, talk about something called appropriation law. The bill on the Hill, you're all familiar with it. The House passes the bill, the Senate passes the bill, then you've got the conference committee, the administration sits in on the conference committee, and the bill gets signed into law. Folks, there's an appropriations law that says no child, no senior, no one should go hungry in this country. But the president has decided once again that he's above the law. Now, I was relieved being with my attorney general, who was part of 2000, who was part of 23 other attorney generals and 3 governors, that he was part of one of the court orders that said release the funds, pay out the benefits. You don't have the right not to do that. We were relieved. We weren't real happy. They were going to maybe be partial. They don't have to be partial. They can be full. We have a little thing in appropriations law. But then a tweet on what's something that's called Truth Social. How about the truth? The truth is the law is being broken. The judges told you you were breaking it, Mr. President. Get the funds out to the people who deserve us. But make no mistake, this doesn't come as a surprise to my colleagues and I up here. Staff and cutting staff has been a goal of President Trump. Just look at Project 2025. It laid out there massive cuts to SNAP, the big beautiful bill, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, and $18 billion cut to SNAP for this year and for the next 9 years afterwards. And then in the Republican agriculture bill, which is awaiting to even be heard on the floor of the House after a conference committee with the Senate, that had another cut to SNAP, $4 billion. So that the fact that the president is going back on what we thought they had agreed to, but the course to do it comes as no surprise to us. I just have one comment. Mr. President, follow the law. Mr. Speaker, bring the House back to order. And with that, I would like to introduce a dear friend of mine, Ms. Deborah Ross.
Well, you've heard it. Speaker Johnson has not called the House back into session. This Congress, not anybody here, passed the big ugly law that started the cuts to food assistance, and things have only gotten worse. I know that we're talking about a government shutdown, but the folks here, when we're not here doing the work that we're supposed to do, actually talk to the people we represent. We talk to people who are losing their food assistance. We visit food banks. I went to visit a food bank in my district, and they talked about how bad things have gotten since Trump took office. As you've heard, the big ugly law cut food assistance by 20%. That was before the shutdown. They passed that down to our states, and many of our states have a state legislature that won't take up that food assistance. Then we have tariffs raising the price of food. The food banks in my district have to feed more people with less money at higher prices, and they can't even get the same kinds of donations that they did. And that was before the government shutdown. And then the government shuts down. Mike Johnson, AWOL, completely AWOL.
Yeah, I'll from the office.
And SNAP starts to run out. But as my colleague, Betty McCollum said, Congress thought about that in advance and put together a contingency, a law that says that people get fed. And what did Trump do? Ignore the law. Yet again. Then he gets sued. He loses. Yet again. And then he says, I don't care. It is time that he and his administration are held accountable. It is time that Mike Johnson calls us back into session. And it is time that we do the work of the American people. I am now going to turn it over to my good friend from Maryland, Glenn Ivey.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you to my colleagues. I just came from my district. It's about 5 miles east of here. And had a chance to talk to a number of my neighbors, frankly. One of these events was in my town. I had neighbors that were standing there trying to figure out what to do, how to make ends meet. They'd lost their jobs, they're on furlough. And earlier, just before that, I was at a food bank. And we had the line around the corner. We had people standing in line, some of whom I recognized. In fact, one of the women in that line used to work for me when I was the state's attorney in Prince George's County. And she was embarrassed to be standing in that line, having to come and get food. But I said, you know what? This isn't on you. This isn't your fault. This is the fault of the Trump administration and the Republicans. They brought this on you. They brought this on the American people. The SNAP issue they brought on 42 million Americans, and they should be totally ashamed about it. And the court said pretty much the same thing. They said, what you're doing is illegal. There's a fund there that you should be using to make sure we don't have hungry people have to skip meals, veterans, elderly, children. Use the money. You're legally obligated to do it, and he's still trying to dance around and find a way not to do it. One of the ladies I talked to today, she said, you know, Mr. Ivey, these guys are even worse than I ever imagined they could be. But you know what? We're stronger than they thought we were. And we need you to be just as strong as we're being. These are people who are hungry. These are people who lost their jobs. These are people who are worried about losing their health insurance. We're going to stand firm and make sure that does not happen. We're going to fight back. We're going to make sure we force the Republicans to come back here. House Republican leader Speaker Johnson put his photo on the side of a milk carton or something so we can find where he is. Maybe it's in the witness protection plan. I don't know, but they need to get their asses back here and do the job they're supposed to be doing. I've got furloughed employees in my district who are not getting paid. They want to do their job. Some are doing their job. The only federal officials who should not be getting paid are the House Republicans because they've been absent without leave, and they need to get back here and do their job. So with that, I'll stop and introduce Madeline Dean, my colleague from Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Madeline Dean. I represent Montgomery and Berks County, suburban Philadelphia. I want to just start with what I've been starting with for the last 10 months. What we are going through is not normal. We cannot normalize this grotesque administration, the lawlessness, the corruption, the incompetence of it. Take a look at the newspaper today. Top headline, administration won't fully fund food assistance as it comes back from its weekend with the Great Gatsby themed party in Mar-a-Lago, and as he's designing his Great Gatsby themed ballroom. Apparently, the president never read the Great Gatsby because things don't turn out so well for the gilded folks in that story. It's beautifully edited. My governor, Josh Shapiro, joined the lawsuit with the attorneys general and 2 other governors. The 2 lawsuits declared that the president must fund SNAP. He must use the contingency fund. But why would we even be having to ask this president to make sure that our children, our seniors, our veterans who rely upon SNAP resources, the little that they are, be actually funded? Why in God's name would we have to do that when we have a president who somehow found $40 billion for Argentina? I'm newly an appropriator. We didn't appropriate that. We found 40 billion here. He can't find 9 billion to feed hungry Americans. In my district, 51,571 people rely upon SNAP. As you've heard, it is children, it is seniors, it is veterans. I've met with them. 75,000, roughly 10% of my suburban Philadelphia district will go hungry any night. 10% of them. In the richest country in the nation. And yet we have to plead with the president and his corrupt administration to release the resources when he's happy to release the resources for his friends. In Philadelphia, I wanted to compare it, a neighboring city, 450,000 people rely upon SNAP. That's generally $2 a meal per day. We're not talking people getting rich on this. This is the basics. And I have visited, like some of my colleagues, I visited food pantries in my area. As a result of this incompetent, corrupt, tariff-laden administration, before the SNAP benefits ran out, they were having a hard time stocking the shelves because the costs of food are so great. So what I want to say is, Mr. President, do your job. Get back here. Make sure you fully fund SNAP. And Mr. Speaker, you have had this place shut down since September the 19th. For those of you who think we're about 35 days into it, add another 11 days because he chased us out of here and all his Republican buddies because Epstein was broken. They got that CR passed that none of us voted for, and they chased them all out of here. So we are 40 some days into this shutdown of your own making, Mr. Speaker. Get your folks back here. House Democrats are here, ready to do the job. And now it is my privilege to introduce my colleague, Sarah Jacobs, from the great state of California.
Thank you. So, like many of my colleagues, in San Diego this weekend and went to multiple food demonstrations hosted by the San Diego Food Bank in San Diego. I'm so proud of how our local community and communities across the country stepped up in the leadership. But let's be clear, it shouldn't have to be this way. It shouldn't take a court order to force the federal government to feed 40 million Americans. And then the federal government shouldn't fight and slow roll the court order. The federal government should have done this already. In fact, we should have already addressed the crisis that 40 million Americans rely on food assistance to begin with. Americans need a social safety net that actually works. Meanwhile, a new report came out just this week that the 10 wealthiest people in the United States have seen their fortunes explode by $700 billion since Donald Trump. The gap between the
Case in point, while the administration was fighting against paying for SNAP this month and families at home were wondering how they were going to put food on the table, President Trump hosted a roaring 20s party for his millionaire and corporate friends, complete with burlesque dancers posing in massive protein. This is outrageous. The administration needs to follow the law. They need to abide by this court order and feed the American people. And honestly, rich people need to pay more in taxes. And I say that my grandfather founded a Fortune 500 company, and I believe that my family and families like mine should be taxed. We should not have two different Americas, one for the rich and one for the poor, where the rich get even bigger tax breaks and the poor work 2, 3, or even 4 jobs and still are not able to put food on the table. This is a crisis, and we need to have two different Americas. With that, I'll turn it over to my very good friend.
Already 1 in 5 kids in this country is going hungry. And here we have Donald Trump. He's using food as a weapon. He is using starving kids as his political pawns. It is wrong, it is cruel, and it is a choice. It's a choice because we know this president does whatever he wants to. He'll tear down the East Wing of the White House. He'll find $40 billion and bail out Argentina. It's a choice because Congress put the money there. We said we don't want kids in this country going hungry. And so we put money aside so that no matter what happens in Washington, there will be money there to feed people. It's a choice because the courts agreed with us and they said he has to spend this money. But does he care? No. Does he care about the courts? Does he care about the laws? Does he care about kids? No. He got on his jet, he said screw him, and he flew down to his private club. But while he was at Mar-a-Lago, we were at the food pantry. We were at the can drives in our communities. I went to the homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and guess what? The shelves are already bare. I went to a preschool where they have to set out food. Those shelves were bare. Dare to Care. It's the premier anti-hunger agency in Louisville, Kentucky. It was established the day before Thanksgiving in 1969 because a child in Louisville, Kentucky starved that day. And a group of ministers said, we're never going to let that happen again in our community. Dare to Care is doing amazing work, but we get $16 million in SNAP benefits to Louisville every month. Dare to Care's annual budget is $14 million. Recently, their line was around the block and they had nothing to give out but fruit and vegetables. I was at a can drive this weekend. We had people show up, every age, every race, from every zip code. We gave them food with no questions asked. They didn't just say thank you. The look on their faces and in their eyes showed how much they are struggling and how much they appreciate it. To Donald Trump, come to Louisville, Kentucky. Look those people in the eye and tell them you've made the choice to take away their food, that you want them to choose between getting a meal or going to the doctor. It's wrong. It's cruel. And we need the Republicans to come back to Washington, to open up this government, to get people to so they can afford their health care, and tell this maniac president that he has to follow the law and spend the money so we don't have more kids go hungry. With that, I want to turn it over to my good friend and a champion for working families, Val.
So, for the past 2 weeks, this administration has gaslit the American people as they lie over and over again about whether or not they have the ability to fund SNAP. Let's be clear, no other administration in the history of this country has chosen to not fund SNAP benefits to starve hungry people. $6 a day they can't find money for. But they could find $350 million to tear down the East Wing of the Capitol and build a ballroom. They could find $40 billion to bail out Argentina while selling out our farmers and ranchers. Tens of millions of dollars a day for ICE, who are going after not criminals, but ordinary, hardworking people, American citizens, people that are here legally. They can find money for that.
$170 million for Kristi Noem to buy 2 new private jets. Why did she need 2 jets? You can only use one at a time. So they want to blame Democrats, but look around. Republicans are not here. They refuse to show up at work. In their Republican budget bill, just cut SNAP's budget by nearly $200 billion. And they want us to check the box and say that's okay. They could use some lessons about the dignity of work because they wouldn't know the dignity of work if it hit them in the face. Where are they? If they were here, we could negotiate, open up the government again, paying hardworking federal workers, our Capitol Police, our air traffic controllers, our TSA agents who are showing up to work, not getting paid, and using food from the food pantry. I went to food banks like everybody else here, and I was in Coos Bay, Oregon, and the woman at the food bank said, by the end of the month, I wonder how many mothers are going to pretend they're not hungry while they give their food to their children so that their children don't go hungry on one meal a day. This is absolutely fundamentally wrong. This is a fixable problem, but the Republicans think that the more pain they cause, the more the American people will blame the Democrats. This isn't about blame. This is about feeding hungry people. And most people on SNAP who can work, do work. They show up and work while we subsidize corporations that got giant tax breaks in the House Republican budget bill, but pay their workers starvation wages. So if you're working class, you don't matter to these people who haven't shown up. So to the working men and women of America, we say this: do not believe them. Do not listen to them. We see you. We are fighting for you, and we are here. And with that, it's my honor to turn this over to Representative Hillary Schultz from the great state of Michigan.
Actually, Marilyn Strickland is next in the order of it.
Well, thank you to all of my colleagues who stuck this out. And I'm not going to repeat anything that was already said, but here's a very important point I want to make. Access to health care and access to food should not be a partisan issue, because the people affected by this are not having to show their political credentials when they get health care. The fact that we are having this argument in the year 2025 is completely absurd. And to Speaker Johnson, who claims he is a man of God, who loves him, what would Jesus do when he thinks about starving elders, veterans who served our country for long ago, military families today that sometimes qualify for food stamps and SNAP assistance? The other thing I will also say is this: this administration continues to show its ass. They are corrupt, they are crazy, they are chaotic, and they do not care about the American. And to our friends from the press who are gathered here today, to your bosses, please do not engage in awful business. There are two very different groups of people. You have the GOP and their presidents and members of their Senate and their House who are bending the knee, who are afraid to do the right thing to American people. You have the Democrats who stand with the American people. We always have, we always will. But the fact that we are having this debate in 2025, where there are people going hungry, the cost of living continues to increase under this administration, when they have openly said, we don't care about the Americans. We are cruel, we're chaotic, and we want to do something. America is better than them. And House Democrats and Senate Democrats are fighting every single day for the American people. There is no equivalency. Democrats are doing the job. Republicans are missing in action. There's a program that we are probably all familiar with called Bring Your Child to Work Day. Bring your daughter to work day. Bring your son to work day. Well, maybe House Democrats should do a program called Bring a Republican to Work Day, because they need to come here They need to do their jobs. The American people are tired of this drama. Let's show up, let's do our job, and let's make sure the American people understand that government can and should work for the American people. At this time, I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Hillary.
Thank you. Night is falling here in Washington, D.C. and around the country. Back home in West Michigan, thousands of families are going home from work after putting in a full day and wondering how they are going to feed their families because of the cruelty, a choice, the cruelty of the President of the United States of America. They are wondering where their next meal will come from. When my constituents ask, where was my representative time when we were in crisis, I want them to know I was here fighting for them. The president's illegal actions today, defying a court order, are unprecedented. Mr. President, I have a word for you directly. This is not your money. This is the money of the United States taxpayer, specifically allocated for emergencies such as this. Release those funds. Allow it to flow to the families in need. To my fellow Christians who show up here and dare to quote scripture, I have some scripture for you, Matthew 25. And the Lord said, for I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you did not give me food. And then they will turn to him and said, Lord, when were you there? And we didn't do those things. And he said, yea, though you do for the least of me, though you also do for me. Now I'm happy to turn it over to my colleague, Wesley Bell.
So as a freshman member, I have a different perspective, and I'm looking out to you all, and I'm like, you all see this, right? People listening or watching on television, you all see this. It's not just us. Democrats are here standing for nutrition assistance, food. We're standing for Medicaid. We're standing for the American people. And I'll keep this real simple because I focus on folks at home in the St. Louis area. Over 47,000 households in my district depend on SNAP benefits and nutrition assistance. It's 47,000 people, 655,000 people in my state, in the state of Missouri, rely on SNAP benefits. And so this is not a pawn in a chess game or in a political game. And what I'll also say is I've had the opportunity to serve as a judge. I've had the opportunity to serve as a prosecutor, DA. I've had the opportunity to serve as a defense attorney and a public defender. And when the law tells you to do something, and then a court also backs it up, when you don't do that thing, it is called breaking the law. We have an administration that seems to, well, I guess we know 34 times the court has ruled that he's broken the law. And what we're saying is that when it comes to protecting our most vulnerable, we cannot tolerate that. Folks need to depend on the food in the wealthiest, the most powerful, strongest democracy that the world has ever seen. No one should go without food. And so a court has ruled that the administration should fund SNAP. We expect that to happen. We expect our Republicans to get back to work, and let's open the government so that it's working and that it's working for the American people. I get the pleasure of introducing my friend and another fighter for the voiceless, Representative Maxine Dexter.
All right, thank you for sticking with us on this incredibly important day and discussion. My name is Maxine Dexter. I am a mother, a physician, and very proud to represent Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. And for almost 20 years, I took care of the sickest patients in the hospital. Routinely, their inability to afford healthcare, to afford their prescriptions, is why they ended up in the hospital.
It's hardworking people who delay or skip medications because they can't afford their basic needs like food and like the cost of healthcare. And today, Donald Trump is making that impossible choice even crueler. After spending the weekend proudly playing with billionaires at Mar-a-Lago, Trump announced he wouldn't follow the court order to provide 42 million Americans with food assistance. His team may say otherwise, but we know who calls the shots here. No one should have to decide whether to buy groceries or medicine, whether to feed their children or see a doctor. But that's the position Trump is choosing to put 42 million Americans in. Instead of following the law and using SNAP and the contingency fund, a tool he has used in his first term, Trump is choosing cruelty. He's choosing to starve families for political points. In the richest country in the world, hunger is not inevitable. It is a policy choice. Donald Trump is choosing cruelty over compassion. He's choosing billionaires over families. He is choosing to maintain his own political power over helping the people he was elected to serve. House Democrats choose differently. We are choosing compassion. We are choosing to fight for every person who's ever skipped a meal so their kids could eat, for every patient who has ever had to pick between full pantry or a full prescription. And we are not backing down. Because no matter how loud or how lawless this administration becomes, we are loud. Because hunger is not a partisan issue, it is moral. We are showing up. We will use every single tool at our disposal, legislation, litigation, and public pressure to keep our families fed. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, I'd like to close this out.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.